Wysteria, energy, twister.
Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel and the wonderful world of fairies. We are still on F. We are now on Fiastra, also known as Fiara, meaning eagle. So in Irish law, Fiastra and her three sisters were turned into swans by their jealous stepmother. The curse would remain until a man from the north married a woman from the southern island. It took 900 years for the condition to be met, freeing them. Unfortunately, within a moment, age and time caught up with them and they crumbled into dust and simply blew away in the wind. Fialar. Fialar was one of the many dwarfs named in the Voluspa. Fidiel. Fidiel is one of the Huath, a collective name for the malicious and monstrous waterfay in Scottish folklore. She is personification of the entangling marsh grass and reeds, singing a compelling and lovely song as it walks through the reedy edges of lakes. The voluptuous Fidiel will lure in her prey with a cold kiss and chilling embrace. It is said her victims die happily embraced in her arms. Fid, one of the many dwarfs named in the Voluspa. Feeling or File was another one of the dwarfs also named in the Voluspa. Finfolk. In Cornwall, Scotland and Wales, the Finfolk are small humanoid fae tending to gardens underwater in the lochs of Scotland. The anthropomorphic fairies tend to avoid all human contact. Find Joim, originally a goddess of Irish mythology, she was reduced in power and designated to the position of a fairy queen of Ulster after the introduction of Christianity. According to law, when she drew a cup of water up from the holy well, it contained a worm in it. Hoping to conceive a hero, she drank the contents, worm and all, and bore a son she named Connell, who, albeit not as powerful or memorable as his stepbrother, Cuchulainn, he was indeed a hero. Finn, magician, another one of the dwarfs named in the Voluspa. Finn Kiev, fair love, a benevolent and powerful fairy queen in Irish law. She was the tutelary protector of the family the hero, Fiagal, came from. She promised her assistance at the utmost need. Finnin. Finnin was a sister of the beautiful fairy queen Ain and the White Lady of Loch Gur. Finnin was a banshee. Her fairy fort, Loch Finnin, meaning Finnin's Hill, was in Munster Island. The highest hill on the lake shore was called Knock Fennel, Hill of Fennel, and was one of her fairy forts. Ivaldi, also known as Finir. Finir in Norse mythology is named as being one of the Josselfar, the sons of Ivaldi. The dwarfs were the ones who created many of the magical items of the gods, including the golden wig of Sif, the ship, the spear of Odin. Finnar has a son named Slefiu, who is allied to Vifir. Finnvara, a fairy king. Finnvara rules the Connaught fairies of Ireland and the land of the dead. His fairy wife and queen is Olna or Nola. It's very conflicting sources regarding who the queen is, what her name is. And together they are the supreme king and queen of the Sea. The fairy queens in Hayaban and Cleodna owe their allegiance to him and to his queen. Fir Shillis, also known as merry dancers, nimble men, and perry dancers. The Fir Shillis of Scottish Highlands are two clans of fairies who are at war. Their fairy chiefs are fighting for the love of the fair lady. When the aurora borealis or northern lights is bright red, it is a pool of blood from the warring chiefs. Heliotrope, or heliotrope, depends how you want to pronounce it. That's bloodstone. Is said to be splashed with the blood of the wounded fairies. There is also the belief that Fiachilis are fallen angels who were arrested before they arrived on Earth. Fia Darig, also known as Fia Dergs, Fia Deherga, and Rat Boys, a species of the Fomorian, meaning red man. They are malevolent, malicious practical jokers. Possibly originating in Scotland, these Irish fairies are described as looking rather rat-like, having dark hair and skin, fat-bodied, long snouts and skinny tails. The clothing they wear is extremely shabby and worn, looking as if it were pulled from a sewer. They are carrion eaters, preferring fish. Typically these fairies can be found along polluted coastlines, at coastal ruins in damp rafts, or in marshes near the sea. When they can, they deeply enjoy the warmth of a fireplace. Some lore claims that they were once humans, and unfortunate individuals who had wandered into fairyland and are now trying to warn others not to do the same. Unfortunately, their way of thinking has changed, and in attempting to warn, they end up using deadly tricks in an attempt to convey their message. That's why they seem so, evil. They're not really. They're just trying to warn people, apparently. Firbolgs. There's many different names. Firborage, Etithtuatha, rent-paying people, Gamalrade. Tradition says there were 5 different colorizations of Ireland, all of which are said to have originated in Mediterranean. The first 2 people were the Pathalons and the Nemedians. After a point, about half of the Nemedians returned to their homeland as slaves. There, they were forced to carry soil from the plains of Thrace up to the mountainside to enrich the quality of soil in the vineyards, earning them the name of Firbolgs, men of the leather sack. Eventually, these uncultured people returned to Ireland, ugly, dark-eyed and skinned. 40 years later, the Tuatha De Danann arrived. Eochad had a premonition of the coming of the Tuatha De Danann. Fearful, he decided these newcomers to the land were destined to be his enemy and prepared for war. The Tuatha De Danann demanded half of the island to be given to them, and when Eochanan refused, they went to war. After 5 days of battle, the Firbolgs, who had the advantage of heavy spears and overwhelming numbers, lost to the more skilled and highly trained invaders. Eochaid was slain in the conflict, conquered and subdued. They were not wholly driven off. Faries seen, also known as farm fairies, Farin fairies, and the harvesters. The Isle of Man, the Faries seen are solitary fairies known to assist farmers, but are not always successful, as they are not very intelligent. Described as nude and having patches of coarse brown hair, hibernating throughout the winter, these fae are seen in fields, about to be worked, or the newly worked fields. Fifth, one of the many dwarfs named in the Voluspa. Fissura. In the fairy lore of Chile, the Fiora is a goblin, the only daughter of Codenia and the woman of the Viral, Trauco and Thrall. So ugly, women cannot resist his sexual advances. Fiora is described as ample breasts, long hair, but a hideous face. A breath is so foul it can cause backaches, lameness, and even a scar on an individual. An irresistible seductress, coquettishly she bathes in water cascades, combing out her dark hair with a crystal comb. Afterwards, she lounges nude on the bed of moss, sunbathing. Those who she pursues, be they animals or man, are driven insane after her sexual desire is sated. Those who manage to rebuff her have a spell cast upon them. Well, that's not very nice, is it? Then we have Flan ou de Fée, also known as Flan ou Fedak, an Irish fairy king, and he eloped with the Queen of Tara after only spending one night with her, apparently. But they eloped straight after. Flora, also known as Chloris, which can be spelt with a C or a K, the nymph of springtime and of the mythical islands of the Blessed in the river Okinos. Flora is associated with vegetation, especially grains. According to Ovid's six-book epic poem, Fasti, Flora was literally swept off her feet by Zephyrus, a wind of one of the cardinal points. After their marriage, Flora carried spring with her. Zephyrus gave her domination over the flowers. The flower fairy. During the 18th century, fairies were associated with flowers and were seen as beautiful, capricious, gentle, willful nature spirits. Flower fairies love beauty and luxury and hold in absolute contempt the very idea of economy and thrift. These fairies deeply enjoy bathing in fresh water. Flattery and offerings of food and wine left out for them. No matter how much they drink, they cannot become drunk. So those are like typical fairies that you want to imagine them as. That's what a flower fairy would be, if you believe in that sort of stuff. For a giant, a hideous, humorless, stone-throwing giant of the Isle of Man. They hunt and devour cattle, and like many of the Fae, they are unstable to cross. They are unable to cross running water due to them not being stable enough. Follet or Follette. They live in the homes of those who dwell out in the country of northern France. Although invisible, the pelt people with domestic utensils, sticks and stones, the voice of the fairies can also be heard. The follet, once they attach to a location, cannot be driven off, not even by an exorcism. Follette. On the island of Sicily, the Follette are weather fairies. To light and small, they are almost invisible, riding upon grasshoppers and playing a game similar to polo. The Follette have backward-facing toes and love to call up hailstorms. Their laughing can be heard over the downpour, completely oblivious. To mortals, it appears the Follette call up storms for their own amusement. Fomorian, also known as Fomorians, or Formur. At one point in time, the Fomorians were a fairy race, ruling over the country of Ireland long before the Great Flood, and were skilled in magical arts. They were a warlike people and ruled the land with brutality. The Fomorian were literally driven off the land and into the sea by the invading Tuatha De Danann. Over time, these fairies began to de-evolve, and their physical appearance changed into misshapen bodies with an animal-like appearance. No two were alike, some having one leg while another had three. Some had the head of a man while the other had the head of a goat. These monstrous Fomorians became foul-tempered, uncultured, and unintelligent. That's interesting. Fossa Grin. And there's variations. Fosse Grim, What for Grim, and Stromkari. So the Fossagrin are a species of Norwegian fairy, guarding waterfalls as they play the harp and sing, described as looking like small but perfectly formed and physically attractive humans. Their feet taper off into misty nothingness. They're unpredictable by nature, and they can change both their mood and gender at a moment's notice, so be careful with them. Fountain fairies, the Naiad. Fountain fairies, as Homer, the greatest ancient Greek epic poet, wrote, they preside after perennial springs. And there are absolutely many fountain fairies out there, but wherever there is a spring near mountains, there is your mountain fairy, which is interesting, but there's so many to mention anyway. Frau Hall. In Germany, Frau Hall, mother spirit, was likely at one time a goddess reduced to the status of fairy. She has the ability to confer fertility on women who wish to conceive a child. Frau Holle is believed to live on the bottom of a pond where she tends to a beautiful garden of flowers and fruits. Oftentimes, this fae will gift visitors to her pond with cakes or pastries. Babies are also said to be delivered up from her pond. Frau Holly will take advantage of children who walk near to the edge of her territory, pull them down into the water with her. Good children are said to live a life of fortune and well-being beneath the waves, while she transforms naughty children into changelings for later use. An extremely tidy individual, it is said, when it snows, Frau Holle is shaking out her feather bed. She will reward diligent spinners with new needles and doing some of their work for them, while punishing lazy spinners with dirtying and tangling their flax. Housewives who do their work well will sometimes find a silver coin on the bottom of their pail, placed there by Frau Holle as a reward for their hard work. Each year she takes a walk through the fields and meadows, making them bountiful. However, she will also lead her hounds on a wild hunt through the forest. Her pack will tear apart any unfortunate human or benign fairy that they do come across. It is just their way. The next is Frau Wacholder, a goblin, hamadryad of the juniper tree. Frau Wacholder of Germany fairy lore is called upon to make thieves give up their ill-gotten gains. It is believed if a person who was robbed goes to the juniper tree, bends down one of its branches to the ground, and pins it there with a stone, the thief will present himself and return the stolen item. Well, I've not tried that. If anybody's tried that, do let me know. I'd like to know if that actually works. Frid, Fridian, Fridic, and Fridag, all the same. Highlands of Scotland. The Frid are said to be fairy creatures dwelling inside rocks and living off breadcrumbs and milk spilt in the ground. It's not a nice thing, is it, to live off, really? Fridur, beautiful or fine, was the beautiful daughter of the giant Thaise and the human woman Dofri. Her father was slain by the hero, I think it was Sufolame, with his magical sword, Teofing. With her father slain, Fred was taken by Suafolame, by the person who slayed her dad, basically. Frosty. Frosty, one of the many dwarfs named in the Voluspa. Obviously, that's where it comes from. You know, I mean, as a general rule anyway, it's not that you wouldn't know that, because it seems pretty obvious, doesn't it? Fulanga, fully long or tall enough. Another one of the dwarfs named in the Voluspa. And there's many. Fundin is another one. Fundin meaning found was another dwarf in the Voluspa also. But there are thousands in the you know, there are thousands of them. So to name them all, I don't think I'll be doing, just because there is actually that many guys, and there really is many, many dwarfs named in the Voluspa, just like there's many different nymphs in Greek mythology, and dryads and hamadryads, and there's also many different dwarfs named in the Voluspa. And the Voluspa's easy enough to find. I have a copy of the Voluspa myself, so if you are ever interested in knowing its contents, then it's quite easy to find the Voluspa. And I'm sure if that's what you're interested in, you could just look at the whole book rather than me have to tell you all the dwarfs that are in there. Because ideally I want to do the rest of the worldwide fairies more than just sort of the goblins in that one book. Anyway, guys, that is the end of the fairies in F that we are doing. So when we come back, we will obviously move on. Please hit that like, share if you can, and also please consider subscribing if you have not yet done so. Thank you for joining me, and many blessings.
Wysteria. Energy. Twister.